Our first instinct in order to feel better is like, oh, I need to explain to them what I actually meant because they've taken it out of context. They've not quite understood the depth of what I was explaining or the perspective that I had. And so our first instinct is, I better message them and tell them what I actually meant. But that sometimes actually just re-traumatizes our wound because they are set out to misunderstand you. And they are totally entitled to have their opinion as well. That is totally okay because everyone is on their own journey. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk. And this is my segment where I observe things either in the media or while I'm watching reality TV because, as you know, I'm a little bit obsessed. And I actually think we can learn so much from watching these programs. Not only are they entertaining, and I'm here for it if you love it as well, but I always take so much from this because reality TV is like the behind the scenes view on, and obviously it's curated, right? Everything is curated, but it's a really cool behind the scenes look into famous people, into super wealthy people, and we can actually take so much from that. So today's episode, I want to talk about how on your journey to success, on your journey in business, it's almost a rite of passage that you will be misunderstood, that you will have haters, that you will receive criticism. And as shitty as it feels, I've experienced this through my journey as well. And there are so many things that we can do to process that, to build the emotional resilience around it, and actually create a sense of safety in becoming more visible. Because, I always talk about, being the nice girl or being the good girl. And maybe, I know for me, my automatic response through most of my life, my survival mechanism was to fly under the radar. Don't stand out too much, because if you don't stand out, then you can't receive criticism, then you can't be misunderstood. And those are things that I really had to work through. So I am going to share 3 tips or 3 steps that I have on how to process when you do receive criticism or when you do have haters. And this is actually so timely because I just had a conversation with one of my beautiful clients on her fear around actually showing up in her business. And her biggest fear was that she might be criticized. And this morning as well, like the universe always aligns so crazy. This morning as well, I had another client who over the weekend had received some not so nice feedback from some clients. And I spoke to her around how we get to hold this energy, how we get to move through it, because it is a bit of a shitty feeling, to be honest. So I'm going to share my 3 tips. But to give you some context, I was watching the Kardashians, one of my faves, and Kim Kardashian was being interviewed by a media outlet, and they asked her, what advice do you have for women in business? And Kim Kardashian replied with, get the F up and work. Work your ass off. I worked hard to get to where I am. And while that is valid advice, other people online took it as the fact that she was saying women don't work and they should work. And so it got taken a little bit out of context and she was misunderstood. And what I actually noticed in that was even Kim Kardashian, probably the person in the celebrity world who probably gets the most hate. She felt mortified that people had taken what she'd said and interpreted it in that way. So what I realized was that even Kim Kardashian gets rattled by criticism. And while you get better at it every time, you get better at holding that energy, you become more and more resilient. I want you to know that at every single level, no matter how successful you get, you will be misunderstood. You will receive some sort of criticism along your journey. And while it does get easier, it feels a bit heavy. So this was super timely that I was watching this the other day, because recently I have had this come up in my own world. And while I've had this happen maybe twice through my business journey, like I am so grateful that maybe it's only been twice, each time it's been pretty heavy to hold. And recently I shared a post on social media and someone took what I said out of context. They were immediately triggered by the way that I said something and misinterpreted what I was saying, because I was sharing a new perspective on something that I don't see a lot of people talking about. And while I had a ton of DMs and comments saying, "Thank you so much for this perspective, Jess. This has helped me so much." One person took it in a wrong way and wrote a whole post about me. And it was very clearly about me because it quoted me word for word. And while I don't follow this person, quite a few, like a lot of people actually saw this and immediately said, "Oh my gosh, this is about Jess." And so they sent it to me. And in that moment, when I saw this, I immediately thought logically, I don't really care, because that's okay. That's their interpretation. That's their experience. And I know that by me sharing that, it has helped so many people. But what I noticed inside of myself was my body, my nervous system started to go, "We are not safe." And while logically I was like, they misinterpreted it. That's okay. It's not a big deal. I don't really mind. It doesn't impact me in how I'm going to show up. Inside my body, there was a reaction. There was a fight and flight reaction. And so in that moment, I got to look inside and question, why was this happening? And the deeper belief that I have had in the past was, when I share my opinions, when I stand out too much, it is unsafe for me. And so in that moment, it triggered that automatic response inside of me. And it would have been so easy for me to say, okay, I better not share my opinion so potently. Okay, I better water myself down again because this is unsafe. And while I can notice those things that come up, I actually decided to lean deeper into processing this. But I want to share 3 tips on actually processing this and how to move through this, because it's not just me. And I'm sure you've had this, or maybe you have a fear of this happening as well. So the first thing is to remember that you cannot make everyone understand you. Everyone has their own versions of reality, their own experiences, their own beliefs, their own perspectives. And as much as you want to, you just won't be able to make everyone understand you. And the best quote that I have heard is, never waste your time trying to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. We just can't. Because we are human beings and we do long for connection. It is an automatic response to want to be accepted, to want to be liked, and to be understood. But when we come to peace with the fact that there will always be people that misunderstand you, it removes the pressure to need to be understood. And also with that, knowing that you actually don't need to respond. Because our first instinct, in order to feel better, is like, oh, I need to explain to them what I actually meant because they've taken it out of context. They've not quite understood the depth of what I was explaining or the perspective that I had. And so our first instinct is, I better message them and tell them what I actually meant. But that sometimes actually just re-traumatizes our wound because they are set out to misunderstand you. And they are totally entitled to have their opinion as well. That is totally okay. Because everyone is on their own journey. But the hugest thing that you can do in whether you're being triggered or whether you are the one maybe receiving the criticism is if we always assume that everyone has the best intention, the world feels a whole lot lighter. Very few people go out into this world with bad intentions, with thinking that I'm going to write this post so it upsets someone else. And so we can sometimes villainize the opposite person who's maybe made us feel a bit shit. And so we go into attack mode or we go into retreat mode. But actually, rather than seeing them as a villain or seeing them as someone who is a threat or makes us feel in a negative way, what if we just assumed the most generous thing about them? Whether you are being triggered or whether you are receiving the criticism, when we show people love and compassion, and you don't have to message them or talk to them, but just the energy that you put out towards them, it feels a whole lot better than seeing them as a villain. And we get to heal the world when we can all do that as well. Now, number 2 is quite often we tell ourselves that we don't care. You know that internally you feel dysregulated. You've been triggered in some way. But we try and rationalize it. It's like, oh, you know what? I don't care. Their opinion doesn't matter to me. That's okay. Yet inside our body, we still feel unsafe. Even if it's a very slight feeling, we've all felt it at some point. So how do we start to move this energy? Often, it literally takes time. Often, time is the best healer. And resilience gets to be built every time we experience things like this because it shows our mind that we are still safe. We didn't die. We didn't die and we are still here to live another day. So time 100% gets to be part of it. But the second part is actually not to disregard our feelings, but to feel them. How does that make you feel when you're misunderstood? What are the narratives that are showing up for you? And you can start to journal on this because it's only when we allow ourselves to process these emotions that we can move through them. The more that we push them down, the more that they want to come up. It's like telling a naughty child to stop doing something and all they then want to do is do the damn thing. So sometimes we just need to sit with it and really allow ourselves to process the emotions and the feelings that do come up because we are human beings. If we didn't have feelings, we might as well be a rock. So allow yourself that. And number 3, and this is quite possibly the most important step, is don't let someone else's perception of you change how you show up and share your magic with the world. It's very easy to take the narrative and say, see, this is just proof that I shouldn't share my opinion. This is just proof that I shouldn't give people advice. This is just proof that I shouldn't be in business, so I'm going to just go and hide again. But what we actually need to see it as is proof that we are being called up to that next level. Because if Kim Kardashian still experiences this, we get to actually take this as an opportunity to rise up. And so how would you continue to act if that didn't happen? While we process the emotions in the back end, while we do all of that work, the key is actually still showing up and doing things as if you would have. And while we can be open to learning and growth, like we can take, okay, this situation happened. What can I learn from it? Is there something that maybe I do want to change and this has allowed me to grow and expand? Because when we can let our egos down and see everything as a learning opportunity, we do get to evolve. But at the same time, there is going to be discernment between, am I running and hiding? Or am I taking this as a learning? Maybe tweaking a couple of things and then still taking action and showing up. So with my client this morning, she had some criticism, and what she learned was, okay, I can streamline my business process so that I avoid this from happening. And actually, that wasn't to people please. That was actually just to create more boundaries around how she runs her business so that we don't put ourselves in situations where we almost purposely re-trigger ourselves, where we almost are asking for this to happen so that we can have more proof, and then we have this self-fulfilling prophecy. So I wanted to just share some of those insights. This has been a huge part of my journey, a huge part of my growth and my healing, and is something that I speak to my clients all the time about. And I just want to leave you with the fact that you are not alone. Because if we didn't care, would we really be humans? If we didn't feel this, would we really be caring and empathetic human beings? I'm going to leave that there. This wraps up today's episode of Real Talk. If you have enjoyed this episode or any episodes of the Jess Williamson podcast, it would mean the world if you screenshot, share it to your stories, and tag me at jess.williamson8 on Instagram. And I will see you on the next episode.